Now, about these statue destroyers, they see racism everywhere, and they can't let stand a single stone or sign or even blade of grass that reminds them of it. Nothing. Now, comedian Josh Thomas even wants coon cheese banned because of the name, although the name is actually of the inventor. A Victorian bottle shop, as I told you last night, is banning beer by the Colonial Brewing Company because of the oppressive word colonial, triggering. And anyone even suspected of connections to slavery, well, get rid of their statue, get rid of any reminder of them. And staff on the far left Guardian Australia seem pretty sympathetic to these statue destroyers, you know, even suggesting better statues that they might not then pull down themselves. But here is the embarrassment for the Guardian. Turns out that when it was founded, back when it was the Manchester Guardian, it was founded actually by John Edward Taylor, who made his money from a cotton plantation that used slaves. So there's now a petition, and who can tell if it's real or a stir? Tear down the Guardian, close it now, founded on the back of slavery. If you're a journalist there, resign. Joining me are Rita Pannies, Herald Sun columnist, the Sky News host, and Daniel Wild, Director of Research at the Institute of Public Affairs. I think there's a petition, Rita, that would have your name on it, twice.
No, I'm not into signing petitions, but it is very amusing. But, you know, the Guardian journalist should be stepping down anyway, because it's a very white workforce from what I can work out. And certainly if they're going to be preaching for greater diversity and more ethnic voices, then step down unless you are ethnically diverse and give your job to someone with a unique background, because there's so
like
many people who, well, like me, yeah, there's so many people who preach this stuff, but when you ask them,
I'd love that.
Oh, please, gosh. But when you ask them, will you, as a white person, step down from your position and elevate a person of colour or someone who's got a disadvantaged background or identifies as a certain gender or sexuality? They don't. They like to preach it, but they never actually want to personally sacrifice to make it happen. It's always someone else who has to pay the price.
No, but Daniel, Rita brushes us off. I know I'm not a petition signer either. Whatever you've got, I'm not for it. I'm just staying on my own. But Daniel, there's actually a point here, the hypocrisy, because we're talking about mobs roaming the streets that want to destroy anything, even like you can't have coon cheese because of the name. It just is triggering any connection to slavery. Well, here we go, the Guardian newspaper. I mean, by the same deranged calculations of these people, this paper should go.
Exactly. It's difficult not to enjoy the irony of this moment, Andrew, and I think, as you say, by their own analysis, by their own frameworks and by their own standards, justice demands that the Guardian be sold off, that all of the staff there donate all of their proceeds to reparations because,
yes,
you know, through their faulty identity politics framework, they are perpetuating.
That's great.
They're perpetuating structural disadvantage, imposing intergenerational trauma, and the only way is for the Guardian to be completely shut down. But this is a deeper point, Andrew, which is it shows the futility and inherently destructive nature of identity politics. You can't debate with people that want to look back and rewrite history and use it against people today. And I think the Guardian deserves absolutely everything it's got coming to it right now.
It disturbs me a little, Daniel. It makes me wonder whether you're a plant, that you master that language of structural racism so easily. That's tripped off your tongue a little too glibly. I'm a bit worried about you.
I've completely subsumed and integrated it, Andrew. It's a part of me now.
Rita, what offends you about the statue destroyers? Because on the face of it, you know, why have a statue to a guy who had slaves? I get that. But I don't know. It seems to me the really offensive thing here is the arrogance of people thinking that history is for them to write and to erase. Never mind the past generations that put up the statue. Never mind the future generations that might have another view. They can't have that other view. We'll tear it down for them.
Well, yeah, they want to erase history, not learn from it. And these people who they object to, some of them you can say, okay, there's episodes in their past that are truly objectionable to everybody, but where does it stop? Because it's not just that person was engaged in the slave trade hundreds of years ago. It's now judging them by modern standards. That person had homophobic views. That person was misogynistic. And again, go back hundreds of years and who wasn't, who was a prominent person. So we're going to just tear down all of history. Nothing is going to be celebrated. No great achievements are going to be marked because there is a cross in their background when you judge them by today's standards. I just think it's backward. It is, and it just speaks to a mindset of entitlement and violence, where if you don't like something, you just tear it down. You don't form an argument. You don't try to have it removed legally. You just decide, I don't like that.
I think that's the other thing.
It offends me. Down it comes, and if it offends you that I'm vandalising this property, that's your problem. That's their mindset.
I think that's the other thing. I think that's the other thing, that it is a mob justice kind of thing, and by a particularly small but very, very vocal and intimidating mob that decides this, not up to a vote of people. But am I guilty of hypocrisy, Daniel? I mean, I'm not drawing hard and fast lines here, because I actually cheered the bringing down of the statue of Saddam Hussein. I cheered the bringing down of statues of Lenin and Stalin in countries like Czechoslovakia and Hungary and places like that. When the communists moved out, those people wanted the statues gone. I totally support that. Am I being a hypocrite?
Well, it gets to an important point that it's about more than just the statues themselves, about what they embody and our values. And we need to have a substantive debate about the future of our country and what it means. So it goes well beyond just the statues themselves. And I think there's another important point, Andrew, and this was picked up in your previous segment, which I think was very interesting, which is about leadership and the lack of leadership. And I think a lot of mainstream Australians have been wondering, well, why hasn't the Prime Minister spoke up on this issue? He said, well, yes. I'm not concerned about statues. But I think the issue is that the government and our leaders can't stand up because there's a symbiotic relationship between the political class and the radical protesters, who both use identity politics frameworks. So what's happening to The Guardian, the pulling down of statues, the Black Lives Matter protest, but then you've also got the Indigenous voice to Parliament, which is the Prime Minister supports that, his government supports it. They're all based on the same identity politics framework, which is about, group, identity, racial background. And so you have to take a stand. You have to take a stand at some point and say, no, we're not a country based on racial division. We're based on a country of equal individuals, and you're not going to tear down that statue because your motivation is divisive and harmful to our country.
Yeah, and I thought it was really... It's a very different thing with what happened, for example, in Iraq, where those people had relatives who were oppressed by Saddam Hussein, perhaps murdered by Saddam Hussein's forces. I think that's very different to actually tear down the symbol of an oppressor who has personally impacted your life and your family's life. But tearing down symbols of oppression from hundreds of years ago that have had zero impact directly on you. It's all about collective guilt. It's all about appropriating your ancestors' suffering, not actually what's happened to you in your lifetime. That is the poison of identity politics, and that's something we should call out every single time.
I think that's right. And I think there's also a substantial difference, a moral difference, between a statue erected by a dictatorship against the will of the people, to intimidate the people, to indoctrinate the people, and one that's actually erected, like many of these statues were, public subscriptions, votes of parliament. They're a community activity, and you're actually destroying what other people communally put up. And I think whether you appreciate it or not, that's rather arrogant. And I think there's a substantial difference there. Rita Panahi, Daniel Wild, thank you both so much for your time.
Pleasure. Thanks, Andrew.